Chatham, Virginia. Roll call, please.
All right, Dr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Present.
Mr. Dudley,
Present.
Mr. Scarce.
Yes. All right, let's go ahead. Are there any agenda items to be added? Hearing none, could I get a vote for approval of agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, go ahead and cast your votes, please. All right, passed unanimously. Let's go on to new business. Item A, external funding appropriations. Ms. Kim Vanderhyde.
Well, it doesn't appear, Mr. Chairman, that Ms. Vanderhyde has made it across the street quite yet. So I will do my best to fill in for her, and I am tap dancing under the table right now. So if you'll turn to page 5 or flip to page 5 in your packet, what you'll see is a list of, let's say, 15 or 18 external agencies that this board funds. The Finance Committee requested that the staff put together this list of agencies, as well as request a list of accomplishments for each. And you'll find in your packet that each of these agencies, except the Literacy Council and the Tri-County Lakes Administrative Commission, did respond to our request for a 5-year look back at accomplishments, and they are provided herein for your review. Staff doesn't have any further comment on the matter except to receive your direction. If any of these agencies you deem to reduce, cut, or appropriate additional funds, we will need to work on that this afternoon and figure out the best way to appropriate additional funds. Of course, any cuts would be remitted to the contingency budget. I see that Ms. Vanderhyde has arrived, and I'll allow her any additional comment on this most important matter.
Let's see it.
I really don't have anything to add. I have provided, and I'm sure he's went over there, this with you all, that I have provided a listing of the last 5 years of funding that we've provided for all of these outside agencies. But we are certainly here if you all have more questions or need us to do further research on the matter.
Any questions or comments from committee members?
I have none, thanks.
Okay, do we have any comments from other board members?
No.
I do have a question. On the one that did not report or give us a report, what was there a reasoning for that, or do you know?
I know that the literacy program, they did not provide one. They just said that it was taking a little bit longer because they hadn't been in the position for the 5 years and they had to do some research.
Okay.
I think Mr. Smitherman actually got an email from them today. They may have gone on and provided their report, and I have not heard anything from TLAC.
Okay.
That was the only other company that didn't respond, or organization.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vanderhyde.
I just checked my email, Mr. Chairman. I have not received anything from Literacy today. They did contact me last night, but I've not received any additional information. I cannot, even though I am a member of the executive committee of TLAC on behalf of Pittsylvania County, I cannot comment on why nothing was submitted. I was just at one of their meetings last week, but I do not have any. I can answer any questions you have about TLAC, but I do not have a report from TLAC.
Well,
That's all I have, thanks.
I really see nothing that I personally want to see cut or taken out, but if there are no other comments, I guess we can move on. Okay. Hearing none, we'll go to 5B, selection of 2 volunteer agencies for annual audit. And who do we like to have pull that? Would Mr. Hunt be a good candidate to draw?
I
Being
think
an
that's a
officer of the
fabulous
court?
idea. Officer of the court?
Y'all
And just as a reminder, you did approve earlier in FY '21 to pay for an audit for 2 volunteer fire rescue agencies to be selected at random, and we are presently selecting them at random. Mr. Slimp recommends. Poor grab. Those are your 2.
Okay. Keeling and Callens.
Ms. Slimp?
All right, any other comments on that from anyone?
I think Kim can tell you that we did put it out for bid, and we did get,
We did. We got 3 proposals, and we chose Harris, Harvey, and Neal to do this work, and they will do each audit for $3,000 each. So that'll be a total of $6,000, which will come from our audit department. We have a department for audits such as this one and others that the county would have.
And I guess the only question I have, this should not go any more in depth than what they have to do for a nonprofit.
Correct. It's just cash receipts and disbursements. They'll look at all the monies that have gone out and all monies that have come in.
So it should not be a big hassle for anyone.
It's not anything extensive.
Okay, good. All right, any other comments from committee members or board members?
No, sir, thank you.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item C.
Can we get a motion for that?
Oh, did we need a motion?
Are we okay to get a motion on that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I,
Yes,
mine, I cannot even move mine to see the motion, so.
And I left blanks for the ones that were chosen, so it is Callens and Keeling.
Okay, can we get that motion? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I make that motion for
Keeling and Callens.
Keelan and Callens to be selected for an audit of cash receipts and disbursements by Harris, Harvey, Neal and Company, LLP.
Okay, we have a,
Second, do you need a second?
yes, we need a second.
Second.
Can you second it? All right, good deal. Okay, go ahead and cast your vote, please. Okay, resolution passed 4-4. Okay, now we can move on, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go on to fiscal year 22 contingency budget appropriations. Ms. Vanderhood?
Yes. If you all will recall, during our budget process, we had several items that were listed under contingencies that you all needed to make a decision if you wanted to fund or not to fund. And at the time, we approved the budget as it was, which meant that those items still remained in the contingency line item. Those amounts are listed, they're on page 150 of your packet, and you can see what they all are. Some of them are not pertinent. They're things that you really don't have to do, but there are some that we really do need a decision on today. And those 3 are listed in your summary that's on 148. And they are the match for our Bulletproof Vest program, and that is a program that the Sheriff's Office, they apply for each and every year. And so we've put that local match that's in there. If they do not get the grant, it doesn't get moved out of contingency anyway. So it's just, just a reaffirmation that you all are okay with them applying for that. The other 2 items are jail vehicles. There were 2 of those that were requested by the Sheriff's Department for the jail, and they are transport vehicles for inmates. And so the current inventory for those cars, there's a 2015 Explorer, a 2017 Explorer, and 2 2018 Explorers, and a 2012 van. And the sheriff plans to replace the 12 van and the 15 Explorer, and they both have in excess of 160,000 miles on them. So that's one of the items. And the last item pertains to the jail medical billing compliance analyst. Just to give you a little background, we budgeted $40,000 in order to hire someone to do medical billing for the jail. And that was in the budget for approximately 2 years, and it just sat there. And so we, as a county, wanted to move along with that, so we worked with the Pittsylvania Community Services Board, who was willing to come and take a look at that program and see what would be needed. And instead, the sheriff decided that he would hire someone on a part-time basis that will come in and kind of analyze things for themselves. And so that money was utilized at that time. This year in January, the sheriff actually hired a medical coding analyst or a coding billing compliance person to code those bills and to get some money into the coffers. So that position started January 16th. So now we have two positions that are trying to be funded with the same $40,000. So we need to know, do we still want to continue with that part-time position that was analyzing things at that time? Or do we choose not to fund that and that person be let go?
Is that coming from Sheriff Taylor, is it still necessity there for that?
Yes,
Okay,
he says that it is. That was his request.
okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
my comment was the same as it was the last time we addressed this issue. We're going after funds that we're going to be well down the list of being able to receive because these people aren't paying fine. I mean, you know, it's,
Yep.
we're not going to get the money. And I don't have a problem in saying we need someone to be collecting. I'm just not sure that there's enough to keep someone busy to the full extent of, I think it's $44,000. Why would we not repurpose the position to encompass working with through our finance department and still using that person to help the sheriff with those endeavors, but give us opportunity to have him help with the collections on the county side for things too.
Are you talking about like spreading responsibilities around to other areas?
Yeah, and have him report
Yes,
to the county
that's right.
department, and, you
Yep.
know, the sheriff can just send the stuff over that he needs for him to go after, and, you know, the landfill or, you know, whomever can use his services. It seems that if we're gonna fund that position, it would be, we would get more bang for our bucks, because when I asked the question before, it had been very, very limited funds received from his endeavors from July to December. Is that not right?
Yeah. And I think it would be good stewards with the money, you know, as far as that goes, to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, just for me,
Yep,
I think a position of collections, if it's not going to more than fund itself in collecting bad debt, then we will be better off to outsource it to someone that'll take it on a percentage and not have us throwing good money after bad money.
right.
And you know, certainly you work closely with the sheriff's department anyway, so it shouldn't be an issue with him sending over what he needs, and then, you know, any other department that have collection needs could use those sources too. You know, I think I could support that. Just food for thought.
Is this something we need to vote on today? Yay or nay? Because we, you know, maybe get the sheriff to weigh in on it and see what he says? You tell me.
So July 1 starts. I mean, sure, you could bring him in July, but then
Yeah, I see.
we'd have to find.
You want to do it
funding
prior
some
to,
other way.
yeah, I see.
And, I mean,
He
that's
wouldn't have
fine.
he wouldn't, until we met again, he wouldn't have another, he wouldn't
That's
have
right.
a job.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I'm giving everybody voice to it, you know what I'm saying?
yes, nothing
Yep.
wrong with that. I mean,
Yes,
he'd just not have,
yeah.
2 or 3 weeks of July, he's on vacation. He's retired anyway, isn't he? I mean, this is a secondary.
You know, one thing the board could do, not to rush this, is go ahead and let the position lapse on June 30. You could have the sheriff back at a work session in July to talk about it. I do have some reservation at Mr. Warren's suggestion, mostly because collections are the tax collector's the treasurer's responsibility, and we don't do a lot of collections. If we want to get in the audit business, I could probably get behind that. I could
Well,
probably,
that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yep.
Was auditing and process, because, you know, we had that, and that's what he did, this same individual, I think.
Yes.
Did it for the,
business personal property,
yeah.
I believe.
And I mean, I think we just need to repurpose the position to include, so that the sheriff gets what he needs, but include a broader spectrum for him to do.
Covering more than just that one, that's true.
Yeah, we could absolutely repurpose the position into a more neutral department like finance. We could have it audit functions as we deem appropriate, whether, I personally believe our land use program needs auditing badly. I don't think there's been eyeballs on that in many, many, many years. There are other areas, I think, we're discussing one later today, the cable franchise fee. I mean, I wonder if he could audit, track that thing back to where it belongs. But if the board wants to let it lie, let it expire June 30, and then talk about it again in July at the next Finance Committee meeting, that'd be fine too.
Any other comments, discussion? Well, for me, number one's a no-brainer. As far as the vehicles, didn't he just originally ask for a van in the budget process, or?
I'm pretty sure he,
Actually, originally, I don't think there was a request for either. I think that came in later.
I think
In this
Was it in there?
explanation, one of the vehicles is a van going out, so you think one going out would be one coming in.
yeah, the
Yes.
van that they would be replacing would cost $38,750, and the Explorer's $39,750. And you do have to remember that they are for transporting inmates, so
Yes.
they completely reconfigure those vehicles
Right.
in order for the transport.
Cage 'em and
occur.
everything,
I don't really have a problem with the van per se. I think I would want, he's got other Explorers at this point, maybe push that down another year. But the van, I know he was supposed to take some funds before to go towards a van, and I think they bought an Explorer. So if we can get, I guess, will he definitely buy a van this time if we give him funds for that purpose?
I know that Miss Gibson is in the audience, and if we tell her that she can only buy a van, she will only buy a van.
Okay. Well, I think I'd be willing to go as far as that appropriation go for the, a van. Now, as far as, I think we should, I personally think we need to look at this compliance position. Go ahead and let this slide out for this year's budget, end it this year, and then try to come back with a detailed plan on how we can utilize this position in July, if that would be appropriate. So I guess, are we going to take these as a single option, or are we going to try to approve them all at the same, or?
Well, anything you don't approve today would naturally expire on June 30. So your motion would be only for the matters that you deem to approve.
Okay. Well, any other comments, any questions? Hearing none, let's go ahead. Whoever wants to make a motion, please.
In that motion, what do you want to pull out? Any certain thing? How do you want that worded?
What do I want?
I mean, or are we pulling out the compliance?
I would let that, just go ahead and approve number one. If this is what I would do, if it were me making the motion, I would approve number one, and I would approve the van for number two.
Okay.
And let the other one slide.
So we're looking at the bulletproof and the van. Anybody else got any comments?
Just need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that we adopt the bulletproof vest for the law enforcement and the van at this time.
Okay, Mr. Davis. Do we have a
So-
second?
I'll second that.
All right, go ahead and cast your vote, please. I guess I should have asked for further discussion. Was there any further discussion? All right, go ahead and cast your vote. All right, approved 4-4. Okay, let's move on to item D, solid waste equipment purchase financing. Chris Adcock and Kim, if she wants to stay.
Last year, we came to you guys with some pretty significant equipment needs at the landfill, and you helped us with the first phase, which was the new compactor. And in continuing on with that need, and continuing with our being good fiscal stewards, we sent out an RFP for a rebuilt or used dozer. We received 6 RFPs, and I included the staff evaluated those 6 RFPs and brought back our three top choices, and we presented those in the package to you. So they're ranked in order of our preference. There was Marcel is the company that does the rebuilding. It's also the company that we bought the compactor from, and the staff has been very pleased with that. It's like a new machine. Marcel number 1 is a 2015 Cat D8T LGP, and that was our top choice at a cost of $765,000. Basically, these first 2 are complete rebuilds, and it becomes a 0-hour machine. They take the frame of a used machine, completely strip it down to the frame, and build it back with new parts. So you get the new part warranties and all that comes along. It's just not able to be a brand new machine. Marcel number 2 was also a 2015 Cat D8T at $685,000, and Marcel number 3 was a 2011 Cat D8T, which was just a used machine that has been reconditioned. It's not a complete rebuild, so it actually has 8,855 hours on it, and that will remain, or just have some new equipment on it, and that's at a cost of $495,000. The difference between the top 2, the 2015, the LGP, we went back to the company that provides the dozers to find out what that difference is. And the LGP is a low ground pressure dozer. It's got a wider base. It's got 38-inch tracks versus the 28-inch wide tracks. And the benefits, as they stated, are less wear to the undercarriage components and underside of the bulldozer because it does not sink into the waste. Right. It doesn't drag itself along. Less waste gets wrapped up in the treads and the equipment underneath, and it just kind of, it's like being on mud. It stays above the trash and helps to push it along, and then the compactor comes back and does the compaction of it.
And is that for the 2015?
That is for the first,
okay.
the first 2015.
The total rebuild?
Yep.
Yes,
well,
sir.
The first 2, both of those are 2015s. They're both complete rebuilds.
Yes, sir.
The first one, that's $765,000, the higher price one, is the LGP,
right,
which is low ground pressure. The second one, it does have the waste package on it. It's just not the LGP version. So we need, I guess, it states that we need a motion to approve from staff, but I also noticed this is on the business meeting agenda, so that we need just a recommendation from the Finance Committee to approve the bid. Is that what?
Yeah, just need to recommend it.
Let me ask you something, Chris. On these 3, which do you have a preference on those? I mean, as far as what's going to serve the county better, as far as with the job.
Well, these are ranked in order of how the staff ranked them. So
okay.
The Marcel number 1 was the top choice.
Okay.
We just presented 3
sure
to you guys.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Mr. Warren?
I understand why you opted out of option 3, because they only give 3 months of warranty. That would concern me based on a piece of equipment like this. But it also concerns me that the county sends out an RFP that gives a list of specs. And I have a problem with going back to citizens saying we sent out an RFP and all the specs was met of the RFP we submitted. And we have equal warranty on a piece of equipment, but we deem it reasonable to spend an extra $80,000. You know, nothing against you, Chris, but, you know, I'm gonna support the middle one when it gets to the committee because they met, that piece of equipment meets what we said we were looking for. If you all needed this one that runs a little lighter, then that should have been part of the RFP.
Sure.
It's, you know, it shouldn't come after the fact that a vendor is able to say, well, you ought to think about this, and you change your mind and say, that ought to be part of the specs.
And I understand that.
Anybody,
Yeah.
I mean, because we run into this all the time, and I get it a lot from vendors about the county doesn't adhere to strict processes or doesn't give me an opportunity to bid or, you know, all this stuff. So we're under a microscope. So that when I raise my hand for an extra 80,000 and it met the specs that your team, our team put out, it's hard.
Sure.
It's just hard.
Let me give one explanation to that, is when we're dealing with used equipment, lots of times, you know, if we're buying brand new equipment, we can detail the specs all the way down to, it needs to have red wheels. But when you're dealing with used equipment, you kind of got to get
Yep.
what's out there as far as.
But this equipment is stripped down to the bare minimum. If you needed a 38-inch track versus a 28, at least a 38-inch track should have been part of the specs,
Sure.
not 28.
I understand.
I mean, don't come in here and tell me later that you needed more track.
And
I'm
that-
just saying, I mean, I'm one
Sure.
voice. You know, I'm just saying, I'm gonna support the middle.
Understand.
Any other comments from committee members or board members?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I just did this yesterday, but this is the way I've always did in business practice or whatever. Usually when you got three proposals or three products, I've preached this for years to my family, and I think my son does it now. I think my daughter does it as well. The grandchildren are in tow because it's taking me a little while to get through to them. But anytime I have three, I have the one in the bottom, one in the middle, and one at the top in price range. I always go in the middle. It's like I told a guy 2 days ago, I want an oil filter. I said, I don't want your best, I don't want your sorest, I want the one in the middle, and that's the way he did, and that's just the way I always did. Regardless of what Mr. Warren has said, I already knew in my decision and in my heart that I was going to go with the middle project. And I'm not knocking anything you've done. I appreciate the job you've done for the county as well, too.
Sure.
But not from a personal standpoint. I'm just saying that from a personal standpoint, you know. But I'm saying from a business standpoint, I have to agree with the chairman. I'm always looking for the most bang out of my buck. And there are many uncertainties when you got heavy machinery as well, the hours, everything. So anyway,
We would be more than happy with number two, but I was just presenting
yeah,
them as they were. running.
sure, I understand. I'm just letting you know, I didn't want you to take it personal.
Sure.
But that's what I'm supporting. That's what I'm gonna make a motion on to support the one in the middle, and I hope it's all right. But that's the way I feel. But that's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right. One last time, any other comments? All right, I'll take a motion for a recommendation to the full board.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion for purchasing the one in the middle or that second bulldozer. I think it is.
Second.
Could we, before we, could we have discussion on that motion, please, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
We may need an amended motion. Ms. Vanderhyde needs to present another matter.
So in order for us to utilize the Virginia Resources Authority for our financing that we talked about back in January, their fall sale is coming up, and so we need to apply for these funds. The deadline is decide on an amount that we want to finance until right before we submit those documents. So really, all I need from you all is authorization to begin the application process and know that that's the route that we're going. Right now, it looks like we're in much better shape. We have gotten better prices in than our estimates that we provided you all back in January, and I think we'll be in great financial shape as far as how much we'll have to borrow.
So we need to amend and say that we need to,
add that.
yes, to add that as onto the motion, that we need to start the process, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So,
Yeah, we're
so,
just, yeah, we're
so-
looking for an amendment to
yeah.
direct staff to begin the
so let me-
VRA process.
Mr. Chairman, so for what I'm hearing, if it's correct, that means that we got other dollars that we could purchase the cream of the crop then, is that correct?
Right, if you'll remember back in the early part of the year, you all passed a reimbursement resolution. So anything that you've spent so far, we can include that in the financing and pay ourselves back. So we've already bought a compactor that was part of that original financing. And we can also probably buy the dozer, but just know we will not close on these funds until November the 18th.
Okay.
So it'll, even though applications are due the 6th, we won't actually have money until the end of November,
You said November 18th, you said?
November the 18th.
Okay.
So, but if we buy the middle equipment, we will be $80,000 less in debt.
Correct.
So it still makes sense to borrow less money, not more money.
Well, I would double that, wouldn't it? Wouldn't you double that if you're getting outside funds, you're just gonna save because you can put
Heck,
some money?
no. I don't want to live on borrowed money.
I didn't say that. I'm saying if it's $80,000 we're gonna save, if you go with the middle one without outside funding, and then you get you get funding, that would be double, wouldn't it? You know, we'd save $160,000. Maybe I'm not that right on math, but I was just saying, in other words,
We'll pay less interest.
okay, so we'll still make more off of the 80 grand after all. It won't just be 80 grand. Save would be more to it. Okay. Well, I agree with that. Can I amend my proposal or my vote, County Attorney? Yes. Okay, I will make that amendment for that particular proposal.
Second.
Okay, need a second?
Hit it, Doc. There you go.
Did we get a second on that motion?
Hit it, there you go.
Oh, sorry. All right, any further comment? All right, go ahead and cast your vote, please. Okay, it was approved. All right, next item, review of revenue options, Ms. Vanderhyde.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, buddy.
So we have provided you all with a listing. We've done some research as county staff in light of the reassessment that's coming up, and the board's desire not to rely so heavily maybe on real estate revenues, to try to kind of come up with different avenues of revenue. So you'll see a listing in your summary of about 7 different revenues that we have entertained. We pulled code for. It gives you the ability to impose these taxes. So the first one is county food and beverage tax. And we have the ability to move from our current 4% rate up to 6%, and all we need is a public hearing in order to do that. That way, that tax would be spread to anybody that eats in Pittsylvania County, not necessarily a citizen of the county, but somebody just passing through. Secondly is transient occupancy tax, and that one allows for the county to impose a 2% transient occupancy tax, which is just for people that are staying less than 30 days, and that's a camper, Airbnb, hotel room, that type of thing. You can go higher than 2%, but anything over that 2% rate has to be dedicated wholly and fully to tourism. And so idea that we had just because of, the things that might be happening in the county that might bring more, especially campers, people camping out, that we could, cash in on some of that, because usually those are people that are traveling, not necessarily tax-paying citizens of the county. Other items that we have listed there that we haven't done quite as much research on, but we are certainly open to that if you all direct us in that way, is a disposable plastic bag tax. So that would be when you go to the grocery store, convenience store, and you put your items in a plastic bag, you would pay a tax on that bag. We can also look at a fire tax, a cigarette tax, which we have looked in some detail at that, because, you know, you kind of want to know, well, how much money would that generate for a cigarette tax? York County has done some research, and I went by their formula. If we went by their formula and how it's calculated and applied to our population in Pittsylvania County, you're looking at around $775,000. But who knows if that's right? I mean, that's just a guesstimate based on the counties and localities that are already collecting that cigarette tax. A marijuana tax, which we have no idea what it would generate. And then our cable franchise fee, we currently have a franchise utility fee that we are collecting, but we're not sure that we're collecting all that we could be. We don't have anybody that's really looking at that, auditing that, but we do have the ability, if you looked at the frequently asked questions with the Virginia Department of Taxation, they do say that as a locality, we can audit those things. So we can certainly do that if you all would like to. Circling back around, you may want to know that I ran some figures today on the food and beverage tax. Increasing that by 2% would bring in $375,000 more. The transient occupancy tax, just on the event that we have coming up in September, we're thinking that just that one could generate $12,000 to $15,000, but we have no idea on the rest of it because you just don't know what's out there. But I just wanted to give you those as food for thought. We as staff would recommend that you do 1 and 2 because they're easy. All you have to do is set a public hearing, and we would recommend having that at your July meeting, and go ahead and change those, change the food and beverage tax rate, and then impose a transient occupancy tax. And I would leave it up to you all to decide what rate you would like to go with, just bearing in mind, anything over 2% we would have to use for tourism in our county.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Transient occupancy tax, that is that, did you say camping?
Is that what?
Is that like camping?
Yes, it's camping.
Okay.
And hotels.
And hotels and
Hotels.
Airbnbs, anywhere you would stay for less than 30 days.
Airbnbs.
Yeah.
VRBO.
Sure. Also, disposable plastic bag tax. How would you go about doing that? Explain
I
that.
wondered that myself.
Yeah, I mean, let's get down in the ditch and talk about that one.
That would be some of that research I'm talking about.
Yes.
That we would have to look at how other localities collect it.
Yes.
You know, just in my mind, I shop at the food line, you go through and you get 20 bags, you may get 2 cents a bag, and that's added to your bill when you buy your groceries.
Okay. So if you go in with a cloth bag of your own,
You do not get charged that fee. So it's kind of.
do you get 2 cents off
purposes too.
per bag?
I don't
You
think-
see what I'm saying?
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the fairness on both ends. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I will say, there's a great debate in the state about the trash bag
Yes.
tax. And a lot of localities have said it doesn't move the needle enough to really do it. And there's evidence that it disproportionately impacts the poor and minorities primarily. So, you know, of all our options, that's probably the
Sure.
one we're least warm and keen on, to be honest with you.
When you look at the disposable plastic bags, I'm thinking about driving down the road and after the state has just mowed and you're seeing them everywhere. You see what I'm saying? So, all right, that's my questions. Back to you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Davis.
I can just, this is my take on it, the disposable tax, plastic bag tax. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be at this seat, but I don't ever endorse that. I think it's poor business practice. Fire tax, I don't endorse because it can hurt some departments in the county. I'm not for that. That cigarette tax and marijuana tax and cable franchise, I do agree with staff. I'm for that at a later date, especially marijuana tax. I want to see what that does. Because there's going to be a tax on it. So I am for the transient occupancy tax because the Old Dominion Agricultural Center is currently advocating for agritourism anyway, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. So I suggest we use the occupancy tax to further their efforts. I think, you know, they're getting involved and they're helping and they're bringing, you know, work as well as interest to the county. I think we need to help them. So if we go 4% or we implement a 4% occupancy tax, I think half of the proceeds ought to be managed by ODAC to support agritourism. So I would like to get them considered and put in the operation to further the county, you know, possibilities that we have a lot of, not only agriculture, farmers, but other things that we're going with, the other things that we're presenting to the public as far as not only tourism, but what we're looking at now that we've got to hammer out. I think there's opportunities for the county to grow and expand. And I know full fact, the Ag Center has been phenomenal on the animals, everything that I've had opportunity to experience over there. I think it's just great. I think it's just good business. So, do we need a motion? Can I make that motion?
Well, I think we're still making some discussion
Okay.
here. Let's wait for the motion. Mr. Warren.
Yes, I certainly agree with Ms. Vanderhyde that option 1 and 2 make sense. You know, I do like the idea, depending on how we can segregate the tourism funding and be able to monitor it properly. It seems like it makes sense to me if the Ag Center is doing ag tourism, that should be the holding point for the funds. But you want to hold it for me? Should be the holding point. I just think if we're going to do that, we need to be sure we got checks and balances in place because we are talking about tax dollars. I had a couple of questions. I too think the plastic bag idea, along with Mr. Davis, is a terrible idea. When we talk about fire tax, is those funds, if you had a fire tax, only eligible to be spent on fire, or can they be spent on fire and EMS?
A couple things I would draw your attention to. First is it is fire only. The second thing is, and I heard Mr. Davis's comment that it would create disparity in our fire departments because the districts do not have similar tax base, but we can overcome that by making the entire county a single fire tax district. And then we would have the funds, the Board of Supervisors would have the funds, more funds to dedicate toward supporting our volunteer departments with apparatus purchase. For those that a few of you maybe have clued in or tuned in to the Fire and Rescue Commission meetings lately, at the last meeting I made a point that, you know, in my vision, the Board of Supervisors should be paying 100% of the apparatus cost because we can't expect our volunteer agencies to pay for trucks that cost somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million, $600,000 and $1 million or more with raffles and stews. It is not a realistic ask. We are only funding those apparatus at $140,000, and if we're ever going to dedicate more funding to our fire service, particularly to help with apparatus purchase. I think the fire tax is something to continue talking about.
Well, I would agree that the conversation probably needs to be had, but at this point in time, our fire departments are doing an outstanding job in their responses, and I know we got disparity in equipment between agencies, Mr. Smitherman, but I have a great deal of concerns, and this is not even in my district, but as I've said before, I look countywide, not just Chatham Blair's. But for Mr. Ingram's district and Mr. Scarce's district, if Bury Hill does what we obviously all believe it's going to do because of the amount of times we've raised our hand and invested money there, there's going to be significant needs for massive upgrades of equipment for your departments. And I don't think your departments have the funds to buy this equipment. I mean, a fire engine, you know, a big fire engine to handle, 300,000 or 400,000 square foot building and multiple people isn't going to be possible. So I'm not saying the fire tax is the right way to go, but we certainly should be out front trying to figure out how we're going to fund those things when it happens. We obviously got some time because when that project happens, it takes several years to build it. But I'm a believer in thinking about it now and preparing for what's coming, not waiting until it comes.
And that's why it's so important to replace that 54-year-old fire truck.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But you know, when you look at my 3 of the 4 departments in my district, they've come such a long way, but they have some needs, particularly when the
yeah,
good things happen at
I mean,
at the
because
mega
what we
sites.
just approved with getting that fire engine,
Yes, sir.
that would, if what we believe will happen in the future of Bury Hill, that won't take care of it.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just telling the public, you know, I think we need to really be investigating the option, and I will always stand on the platform that it's time for Pittsylvania County to stop always putting the burden of taxation on real estate tax holders. It's time to find other avenues, in particular the occupancy tax and all of these mills tax and all. We're letting outside sources help pay for our services. And that's what successful and prospering communities do. And that's what we need to continue to do, not always go back to our landowner well. So I'm on my soapbox, I'm sorry.
I'll say one more thing about the fire tax, and it's only for educational purposes, that it is a tax on real property, just like the real estate tax. The difference is you're taking a portion of, let's just say our 62-cent tax rate, we take 5 cents of that, and we stick it over here as a 5-cent fire tax. Our real estate tax is 57. Our fire tax is 5. We still have a 62-cent rate, but we have designated a pot of money just for our volunteer fire departments, and we can't touch it for any other use. That is really your ulterior motive, I think, in a fire tax is it makes the money available for fire services only and cannot be used for any other purpose.
Mr. Ingram, did you have anything?
No, sir.
Any other comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna make a recommendation. I'm gonna go with the board. But the term fire tax, that nomenclature is not palatable to me. So I would think, I'm just putting this out there. I'm saying the fire tax needs to be remanufactured.
Yeah, unfortunately,
No, not unfortunately.
unfortunately, the code specifies the title of the tax, and we can't change it.
We could call it fire zones or districts, then levy taxes.
And then we can put tax in parentheses.
I don't
fire's gotta be.
You know, sadly to say, in our day's economy, what's wrong is right, and what's right is wrong. And I also know this from any attorney that's in my presence now, that I know one. There's always wiggle room in the law. And so I'm looking for something, I'm not concerned about, I'm just looking for wiggle room. So anyway, I would appreciate some ideas. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll also, there's a lot of things we don't know about, specifically the marijuana tax. The cigarette tax, we do feel like there is significant revenue available, and it's something that could be levied in a relatively short window. I would think a matter of months, not years. And it's something that we think can absolutely offset your real estate tax in a fairly significant way, maybe as much as 2 pennies on your tax rate. So that's a pretty significant piece of revenue to consider. Regarding the cable franchise fee, we do have an ulterior motive on that. A couple. One is we want to understand it, and we don't. And I'm speaking on behalf of the executive team. We're not there. We don't understand how it's levied. We don't understand what the total benefits are. We don't understand how it's remitted to the state. And we don't understand how it's remitted back to us. So we have education to do there. The second motive is that a franchise agreement can specify other considerations besides cash. It could specify that you set aside a channel for Pittsylvania County programming. For Caleb to use his information boards as a low-level entry point where we have a place to advertise our information, to get public information into our homes other than Facebook. And we're very frustrated at the very limited number of channels, different kind of channel, but channels that we have to disseminate information. And if we had a special channel, it wouldn't cost them anything. They just designate a channel for our use. We send them a CD every 3 weeks, and Caleb produces a scrolling screen. We get into homes and into a venue that otherwise we can't access. So that's another motive we have on the cable franchise idea.
I have no concerns with 1 and 2, but the fire tax, I have gotten a lot of feedback from departments. They're afraid that if you institute that, it's going to cut their donations down. So that's the only concern I have with the fire tax. But one question on that, it has to come out of real estate. You can't add like a 1% on a cell phone bill or something like that. It has to come out of real estate. All right.
It's, the authority for it, it's in your packet, and let me scroll back to it. It's on page, hold on, 160, and it's on real estate, and the last paragraph says, the amount realized from such levy shall be kept separate from all other monies of the county or city and shall be applied to no other purpose than the maintenance and operation of the fire departments and companies established under the provisions of this section. It doesn't say what the maximum fire tax you can charge. It only says that in any city or county having a population between 25,000 and 25,500, the maximum tax rate on this shall be 30 cents on $100 of assessed value. So that clearly was for some person. It looks like it might be Augusta County. So it is on real estate. But Chairman Warren makes a very valid point that there are other levers that we can pull that would have non-residents and non-Pittsylvania County real estate owners contributing towards our bottom line, namely cigarette taxes and increasing meals taxes and transient occupant taxes, for example.
Cigarette tax.
So today's motion, if we need to approve cigarette tax, marijuana tax, you want that added to the motion as well? Or you want to hold off until you do more research?
What we want to do, we absolutely recommend proceeding in July with the transient occupancy tax and the meals tax. Otherwise, we're not prepared to recommend anything. We would prefer that you tell us today, y'all keep doing your research and come back to us next month, but don't bring us that plastic bag tax. Whatever you want to direct us, that's what we're seeking, other than the 2 tax public hearings in July.
Well, don't bring it plastic bag, 'cause I don't like that at all, so. Yeah.
Well, any other comments, questions?
I do have a question on the cigarette tax. What the cigarette taxes in Campbell, Bedford, Franklin, surrounding us? Do you know?
Was
Have
Bedford
you looked
looking at it?
that?
There were a few looking at it, but I'm not sure anybody has it yet.
Okay,
But I know the city of Danville, I called their finance director, and they're not interested.
okay.
Well, I do like the suggestion that adding it, making it 4% for the occupancy tax, so we can take that 2% over to the Ag Center to help out with tourism, so I do like that option as well. But I guess, is there a recommendation for the board? Anybody want to make that motion, or any
Yeah,
other comments?
I want to
Mr.
make sure
Snowden?
that, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, Counselor, make
Yes.
sure that I'm in the right zone. I'll make a motion to advertise a change in the meals tax from 4% to 6%, and to implement a 4% occupancy tax with half of the proceeds to be managed by ODAC to support agritourism.
Yeah, just verbiage, we have to have a public hearing, so you're just authorizing us to advertise in July for that. So
Okay.
we'd have to have public comment. The board just cannot do that unilaterally, so that's my only change.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Davis. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on this motion? All right, hearing none, go ahead and cast your vote. Okay, it was approved 4-4, 4-4. All right, we can move on to review of Parks and Recreation Full-Time Program Assistant.
What you got in there?
Did you bring us some
Okay.
dinner? That's a big enough bag. Did you bring us dinner?
No, unfortunately, I did not. So, good afternoon. The first item that I want to talk to you about is the Parks and Recreation Department is requesting approval to transition a current part-time administrative assistant position to a full-time Parks and Recreation Program Assistant. So the position would still be responsible for administrative tasks such as answering phones, responding to customers that come into the center, but the position will also provide direct support to recreation programs, activities, and scheduling. As justification for this request, we ask that you recall that when Mr. Price was promoted to director, his position was permanently eliminated, so we did not fill that job. And by adding this full-time position, it would account for 3 full-time employees versus the 3.5 that we've had previously. So the additional cost to staff for this position is $22,616.61, and the funding would come from facility rentals and cost savings from the current budget.
Where did you say the funding? You said facility rentals, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just for the Finance Committee's education, believe it or not, the community center beat projections during COVID, even during that period on revenue, and our Wayside Park is generating a tremendous amount of revenue that we had also unanticipated. So largely, this will be paid for with increased revenue.
Yep.
Any other comments from committee members?
I want to say first that, you know, I'm thankful for the Wayside, what's going on there. Ms. Price has done a good job. Thank you so much for that. Tons of positive stuff coming from the folks in Altavista and surrounding areas that's just coming to that. And holy smoke, it's just been a big positive thing for our area. So, you know, do we need to go ahead and make the motion now, Ron, or you want to wait for more comments?
Well, I want to see if there's any other comments from
Yes,
other
sir.
board members. Any
Yep.
other board members?
No, sir.
All right. Yes, you can make that recommendation now.
I will. And Holly, thank you for your job. You do a good job, and I appreciate everything you do. Come in and visit with her, and it's always a pleasure just to breeze through and speak, but thank you for everything you do.
You're welcome.
And I'll make the motion to approve the full-time position in Park and Recreation as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, go ahead and cast your vote, please. Okay, it was approved. And we'll move on to item G, time and attendance software. Ms. Holly Stanfield.
So this is the exciting portion of today's meeting.
You done got one compliment out of me, that's over with. The rest of them will have to hit in on next one.
Okay, so Connie led us through an RFP process to identify a new vendor to process time and attendance for Pittsylvania County. We had 10 responses to that. There was a committee assigned to identify the top 3, and we did that. And from that process, we had a committee that was made up of key people from every department, including the Sheriff's Department, Public Safety, Public Works. And we went through the process. We interviewed the top 3, and we all had consensus on the system I'm going to talk to you about today, which is NovaTime, which is a completely web-based system. So in order for you to really understand why it's critical that the county moves forward with a new system is to take a look at where we are today. So on our last payroll, we paid 460 employees, but that number is really closer to 500 because we currently have 30 open positions between the Sheriff's Department and DSS. So right now we utilize Keystone for time and attendance, and that, honestly, it's just very outdated technology. It will never carry Pittsylvania County into the future. We gave it the old college try. We identified a few departments to pilot leave accrual, and honestly, it just did not work. Not only were we entering time into Keystone, but we were also having to continue our manual processes. So we all pretty much had consensus that Keystone is not going to be the technology that takes us into the future. So because I believe that seeing is believing, I wanted to share with you So that entire stack, if you put that all together, is 1 month. Just 1 month of time cards for Pittsylvania County. And that on average is anywhere from 3 to 8 hours per week for poor little Kathy to have to thumb through and go through every single month. For leave tracking, it's the same thing. So for vacation, sick time, comp time, again, it's a very labor-intensive process. Not only do they track that on a time card, that is also tracked at a spreadsheet by Kathy. So again, we're looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a week alone in that process. So I think we can all agree that with that stack alone is justification to move forward with a new system. So what does the future look like? Automated time entry. Employees will now be able to enter time in via a smartphone. If they have a desktop, they can do it from their desktop. And they will also, certain locations will have a time clock. So what does that mean? All of that disappears. Automated leave requests, the exact same thing. Tracking, approval, requesting will all be automated. No more paper. And then in terms of automated scheduling, This particular web-based system has an automated scheduling component included, so for very difficult scheduling with public safety, where they work 24/7, and we have people that work 12 hours, 24 hours, 8 hours, this system will accommodate all of those schedules. So the key factors that helped make our decision were price, of course, training. This particular vendor that we are working with has unlimited training, and I just want to make a point, that will be no small feat for Pittsylvania County. Supervisors are used to jotting it down on a time card, sending it to Kathy, and letting her fix all the mistakes. So it will be a huge shift of accountability from Kathy to the field. So we need unlimited training. That's a very valuable resource to us. Service, customer service is going to be crucial. And they offer 24/7, 365 service. And then, of course, experience. This particular vendor specializes working with counties. They have experience working with Keystone and integrating with Keystone. So that is critical as well. So if the board approves, then this transition we would like to start immediately. It will take approximately 6 months with a go-live date of January 1. Any questions?
You said the first year would be 26. The cost would be 65 for the first year and 26, 350 for the remaining 4. Okay, I'm just doing the math.
Do you have any other questions from board members or committee members?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The life of the contract, Ms. Stanfield, $170,820. How long is it? Is that for 4 years? Is that the life of the contract? I don't know. I'm just
That's 5.
5 years, because my numbers weren't correct, weren't adding up. Okay. Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I certainly think this is the right route to take. I transitioned, when I was doing government contract, we transitioned from a hard copy to a, we had guys all over the world, so internet-type based system. The hardest part is going to be the training, so I agree with you, training the employees how to use this, be much infinitely easier and cost us less in time anyway, so I think this is a great option for the county. If there are no other questions, I'll take a recommendation for the board.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Miller,
I'll make that motion.
or Dr. Miller, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to second that motion, but should this carry unanimously from the Board of Supervisors? I'm just wondering, Council, if I would like for Andrews Technology to be presented, come before the Board of Supervisors for a questionnaire, okay, and an examination. Even if we award it, I would like to know. I personally, that's just me personally, I'm just making a suggestion. Of course, I would go with the board's consideration, but I'm going to second that motion.
Okay, Dr. Miller, could you go ahead and hit the move button? Okay, we have a second. Are there any other comments? Mr. Ingram has some. Go ahead, sir.
I did. I don't know what was worse, having to fill these out or having to supervise them, but I think this is a great idea. Money well invested. Thank you.
I'll have to second that, what Mr. Ingram said also. And thank you too, Holly, for looking into this and, hey, giving us an example and showing us, 1 month's paper. And I'm good with this, so.
Any other comments? If not, go ahead and cast your vote, please. Okay, it was approved. Thank you.
You got to take your paper back. We don't want it.
Very unhappy if I don't bring that back.
we can't keep this? Are you sure?
I mean, you can if you want to.
Doesn't it have social security numbers on it and stuff, though? Next item is item H, Gretna debt relief request. Ms. Vanderhyde, go ahead, please.
Yes, the county received a letter from Mr. David Lilly, the town manager of Gretna, on April the 29th concerning their annual payment to PCSA of $25,000. They had purchased a water system some years back. It was a 14-year payment plan to pay annually $25,000 back to PCSA for that system. They have currently paid a total of, I believe, $325,000. No, they've paid $225,000. The total of the system was $350,000. So they're requesting that they be
Forgiven?
Granted reprieve of the remaining amounts that they owe, totaling $125,000. That's at $25,000 a year, which would impact our water and sewer budget for FY '22 through FY '26. So back on May the 12th, Mr. Smitherman wrote a letter back to Mr. Lilly, and that was included in your packet as well. In it, he mentioned that it was his recommendation that it be denied to you all, but it is ultimately your decision. And so we are bringing this before you this afternoon for your decision.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you, Ms. Vanderhyde, as well as Ms. Stanfield, too. We need the money, and the county gave the money. I think plastics are going up there, isn't that correct, Mr. Dudley? So I'm for the $125,000 coming to the county. I think it's to make good on your loan debt. Real simple. It's just the way it is. I'm not in favor of forgiving that debt. Sorry. Nothing personal to Gretna. I love Gretna. I'm thankful for Gretna, and we're doing everything we can for Gretna. But nevertheless, business is business, and debt is debt.
All right, Mr. Dudley?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I think if we allow the forgiveness of this, we could set a precedent for somebody else to say, I want the same thing. And I think when you enter into a contract and you paid a certain amount, I think you ought to continue into it. If it's a way that we can help them as far as budgeting this money for the town themselves to get it paid back, yes, but to give them the debt relief, I say no. That's just where I'm at. I'm not sure that it's fair. Say if Town of Hurt, or say if Motley, had a town, or any other town would ask for forgiveness later and we forgave them, then we could be setting ourselves up some headaches. So that's where I'm at with this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Warren?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping my colleagues was going to approve this, because I know Mr. Ingram's district and Mr. Scarce's district and Mr. Davis' district don't have towns in them. So with all the water problems Chatham's had recently, I was really hoping y'all were just going to let this slide through, and I was going to figure out a way to come back and have some forgiveness for Chatham in the future. So, no, all joking aside, I do understand what my colleagues are saying, and I would agree with them that it's not fair countywide for us to relieve that debt.
I think it's tough for a budget for the county. How can we budget if we forgive this and forgive that? So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
All right, well, if there's no other comments, one question, did Gretna receive any COVID funds that could have been used to pay this debt off?
You can't use the ARPA money that we just received. You can use it to upgrade infrastructure, including water and sewer, but you can't go back and pay something that you've already done or been obligated to. It's
But they obviously got some other funds that they have available now to help
Yes.
the city
All
out.
of our towns got significant ARPA funds.
Yes.
To that point, how about the prior money? Could they use the prior money?
They've used their prior money.
No, but could they have used it?
They could, well,
They could have used it for other things and then left more general fund.
correct.
Yeah, I just
think
wonder if
that's
they
what
could
you're saying.
shift the
Yeah.
funds, what they get this time, to take care of the forgiveness.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The guidelines are a little bit different with this round of funding than
Yeah.
we had before.
And I'm not sure that we should even have to figure it out for them. I'm just, putting it out there too. But you need a motion, or you done with?
Yes, sir. Make a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to deny the town of Gretna's request for debt relief in the amount of $125,000.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comments on this recommendation to the full board? Hearing none, go ahead and cast your votes, please. Okay, motion was approved to deny, 4-4. Okay, let's move on. Gee whiz, another one. Item I, comp board pay increase adjustment. Ms. Vanderhyde.
Yes, I believe we made you all aware of the fact that the comp board was providing all comp board reimbursable positions 5% pay increase. The only way that we as a locality can receive those funds from the comp board is to actually give the 5%. Our cost of living adjustment for FY '22 was 1.4%. And we use the Bureau of Labor and Statistics guidelines as far as what the cost index is, and that's what we use, the cost of living index. And so, with that, I had to go through and do a formula and make sure that if we gave a 1.4, that 5% would be less than our 1.4. Well, of course, you in your mind can figure out that didn't work out so well. So we ended up having to give 5%. Now, only 3 of our constitutional officers are currently on the county's pay and personnel plan, and that is the sheriff's office, the treasurer's office, and the commissioner of revenue's office. So those 3 offices are the ones that I had to do the computation on. And all of them, of course, what we figured out, we would have to give 5% to them. Well, because they live on our pay plan, that causes an inequity among our other employees. So in order to make that right, in the following years, we're going to have to evaluate our new cost of living increase and compare that to what the comp board employees have already gotten. And we're going to have to ante up. And we've given you an example in your letter, which makes it a little more clear of how that would look. So if you'll go, it's on page 182. We showed an employee that's making $39,583. And so if that employee were to have gotten the 1.4 COLA, that would take his or her salary to $40,137. The 5% takes that same salaried employee up to $41,562, and you can see that disparity. So this is a for instance, and if in FY '23 we gave a 2.5% COLA, that would take our employee that made 1.4 up to $41,141. And of course, we would be recommending that there would be no COLA given to the comp board positions. And that would include any of your constitutionals in those 3 offices, because they have not caught up with each other. They would not catch up with each other until FY '24, and we would make that adjustment so that it would be completely equitable. Now, all this works great and fine unless, of course, next year the comp board does the same thing again. And so it may make it even worse as we go along, but we weren't real sure exactly how we were going to do that anyway. So the memo you have before you is just a memo that will go out to our employees of those 3 offices explaining this to them. And we wanted you to kind of weigh in on it, because you may receive phone calls of, maybe this is not fair, and so we want you to be aware so that you'll be equipped with answers for those employees if they should call you. But I'm here to entertain your questions. Now, of course, this does not impact the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office nor the Clerk of Court's office. They will receive 5%, and it just is what it is because they're not on our pay plan.
Okay, do we have any questions from committee members?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman, but I do, our law enforcement has been behind for quite a while. We're working to get them back, get them up in compliance with a lot of the state, as well as our school teachers too. So both of those, to me, I support because, I think we ought to do everything that we can for our law enforcement, period, as well. I mean, as far as pay scale structure, because we've already implemented that before in the studies. So I'm for this because I think, as I said, we do all we can for our law enforcement because they're the ones that's in the battle zone, as well as our school teachers.
We have given them, they will receive the 5% increase July 1. You all have already approved that.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just explaining to them what will happen in the future because of receiving that 5%.
I just wanted to make, yes, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I'm behind my law enforcement.
And certainly if the constitutional officers are given another increase in the following years, we'll have to go through this same process. Because that's the only way that we found out from the comp board. You have to look at each individual year. Doesn't matter what you did 3 years ago or the last 5 years. It's all what the comp board has given in that 1 year, and that's the comparison.
Mr. Warren?
Yeah, it looks, on paper, it looks fine to me. I can't imagine the sheriff not being okay with it since they really gonna get a little bit of windfall compared to other county employees, not deputies, but other county employees, because they getting their 5 instead of 1.4 or whatever it was. So, makes sense to me. I do want to be sure and hope the board would always support those comp board positions. If the comp board sees fit to give them a raise next year, we'll just have to work on the matrix of it. But, I don't want to be in a situation where we got some deputies over there that are paid by the comp board and some paid by the county, and they're doing exactly the same job and making different money. That just don't make good sense. I'm sure you all must have had many conversations with the sheriff's department about this.
Yeah, we've got them all on the same plate. They all make the same pay.
Yeah, there is, just so you know, that while the comp board is funding 5% for all comp board employees, there's still another 35 or 40 employees in these departments that are not funded by the comp board, and you guys are paying 5% for them.
But
So
only for
every-
the ones that are on our pay plan.
Well, just
The
those
3
three
departments.
offices.
That's what I
But
mean.
see,
Yes.
We've got probably 40 positions, though, that are fully county positions in those offices. And years ago, we eliminated the fact that this person gets one raise and this person gets another
Well,
raise.
the 2 entities that are not on the county pay plan, do they have any employees that are not paid comp board employees?
Yes.
So what do they do about that?
Which,
They get the same comp board raise. We did that for all 5 constitutionals, and that was before we even implemented the personnel plan and then Commonwealth plan. It just makes for good sense because you really don't want 2 people doing the same job, just like what you explained. And one, they shouldn't know how they're funded. They're doing the same job, they should get the same raise.
so just for clarity, you're saying that we have 100% county positions in the Commonwealth or
Yes.
Circuit Court's office?
In the clerk's office, I believe we have 1. And in the Commonwealth's attorney's office, remember, we approved one
For the body-worn
body-worn.
camera, yes,
But it's
yes,
just 1 in each office.
yes.
Well, I'm not opposed to that, but, it ought to be something about our policy, because it ought to be some kind of treatment advantage other advantages for the departments that are participating with the county versus the ones that are not?
Well, there was an advantage to Mr. Haskins and to us by negotiating that position. Otherwise, we would have actually had to spend more money. It was a General Assembly mandate for the review of body-worn cameras. We negotiated a solution with Mr. Haskins, which was actually to our benefit financially, and that's how he got that extra position. The clerk of court position, it predates me and probably all of you.
Yes, it does. It's been there a long time.
Yeah, I didn't know, I didn't know. And I'm fine with it, I just,
Any other comments? Well, seeing none, I'll take a recommendation to the full board.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna make that motion that we recommend, to recommend that each comp board affected employee receive the provided explanation letter.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Davis, second by Mr. Dudley. Any other comments?
Yes, sir, I do want to make one comment. Ms. Ms. Vanderhyde, how long have you been at your station?
A long time. It'll be 22 years in
22 years. I do want to thank you for what you do. All of our employees, staff, and all Connie, Ms. Bullock, all of them, not Ms. Bullock, but I thought it was Ms. Bullock right there. It's, anyway, Ms. Stanfield and all, the Colonel, you. But I want to thank you for what you've done, because really what you have done in the last 22 years, we only see you once you give your delivery, but it goes back further and deeper that most in the county wouldn't know about, as well as previous boards. But I also want to thank the county administrator for giving you a voice, for transparency, so you could tell us how the pulse works. And I can see how you've blossomed as far as your leadership role in the county. And I do appreciate staffing as well as team leadership that puts those things in place. And then not only that, but you have been a seasoned veteran, but you have been brought out to a new dimension. And that's because you've been given a lot of freedom. And so I want to thank you, because you are the asset for our county when it comes to fiscal responsibility, as well as the citizens of not survival, but our citizenry, our civilization in Pittsylvania County. It goes right to you as well from the money standpoints. Thank you. Sorry for the long diatribe, but I thank you, and I thank for the people that are in place that are allowing people to fly and use their wings. Thank you.
Any other
That's all.
comments before we make a final vote? Seeing none, cast your vote, please. Okay, it was approved. 4-4. All right, last item, I hope for you, Mr. Vanderhyde, items for July finance meeting.
Yes, and this is just a briefing of what you're to expect in July, and of course, we would add any that you see fit that would need some discussion by the Finance Committee. But we will be discussing our economic development grading options. We will review our CARES Act and ARPA projects. We need to go over our minimum wage change requirement. That'll be effective January 1. We just had one that passed, but we were okay with that minimum wage requirement, but January 1st will affect our budget, and also our EMS hard billing will be on that as well.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Vanderhyde?
And also any other items that you wish to put on that July meeting.
Okay.
Let me ask a question, Kim, before. Economic development grading options, explain that. Break it down a little bit.
Yes, sir. We, the Board of Supervisors has obligated itself for participation in 2 grading projects, one in Hurt and one in Berry Hill. And we need to talk about how we are going to pay for those.
So you're talking, and I knew the grading, but you're talking about actually grading versus grading.
Now, I'm talking about moving a lot of
Dirt,
earth.
yes.
A lot of dirt.
So that, yeah, that, you know, I knew that was what it was, because I knew Hurt had something coming up, we had to do this, so.
Yep.
I was just, clearing the air. How about that?
Kim,
Thank you, Kim.
Kim, before you leave, do we need to, will we be verifying the RIFA vote yesterday on the trough pavement loan? Is that going to be at the next meeting as well?
No, sir. We did speak about that this morning in our executive team meeting, but we don't have anything prepared for action this month.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
But we certainly could put it on the Finance Committee agenda for next month.
All right, thank you. All right, last item on the itinerary here, K, approval of fiscal year 2022 volunteer agency appropriations. Mr. Slint, how are you doing, sir?
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Chris Flint.
How's everybody?
Good, good.
In your packet, you should have the recommended allotment for the FY '22 budget. We had a committee of the Fire and Rescue, ad hoc committee of the Fire and Rescue Commission to work on reallocation, and we based it more on call volumes than anything else to make it what we thought would be a little more fair. That went to committee, to ad hoc committee twice. Both times they made the same recommendation, and the Fire and Rescue Commission approved that and sent on to the Board of Supervisors at our April meeting. So before you is that recommendation.
Is that it? That's your presentation? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, all of these funds, Mr. Scares, have been budgeted in the adopted budget. There's a net appropriation increase of about $7,000 or $8,000 over last year. We are putting this in front of you as a formality because we have not adopted this schedule. Even though we budgeted it, we didn't adopt the schedule of disbursement. And those first disbursements will be due in August, I believe. And we just want to have it in the minute book that the board approved these disbursements.
Okay, any questions from committee members?
I guess you don't want to delay either. If we don't take any action, then they don't get any money in August.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Warren, you may.
The one thing I want to point out was we've discussed this multiple times throughout is, you know, hopefully we will continue to work on that matrix. We've had discussions, the commission has and all, that maybe we need to fine tune the matrix and all that. But we've also sent the message from the commission, and we also sent it to the Fire Association, that we now have an emergency fund, so that, you know, there's been questions about what appears to be a reduction, and it does look red. We can see it clearly, it looks red. But if there's legitimate needs, there is an emergency fund that can be accessed. And there's also funds that, if we spend all those, that if they have legitimate needs, could come to the county. So, you know, everybody doesn't need to think that this is hard, in the stone, you know, you can't ever do anything else. If you've got legitimate needs and they come up, then that's why the emergency fund was designed. I mean, you got to go through some protocols, but you got to go through some protocols to get budgeted money. And other than the agencies that gave up EMS services or something, if you went back and looked 3 years ago, what they were budgeted versus what they're budgeted in this year's budget, it is a significant increase to every agency on here. So for me, Mr. Chairman, I give kudos to the Fire Commission for finally having some kind of matrix in place so that there's fairness and equity in this process versus just kind of maybe who's in charge or who's whose buddy or whatever through a mechanism that was not based on any kind of matrix. So kudos to the commission.
And I will tell you, I have recently had an agency who may have that need to tap into the capital reserve, and we're walking them through that now to see if they would meet that, because we think they probably have a legitimate need.
We have about $45,000, I believe, in that reserve fund, and that can be applied for emergency needs by any department. Also, it's interesting, I heard at our last Fire and Rescue Commission, we had one department, I think it was Ringgold, talking about that they were losing $4,000 in this new proposal. But what they didn't say is they've gained over $30,000 in the last 3 years. So like Mr. Warren said, every department is substantially better funded today than they were in FY19, and in Ringgold's case, to the tune of about $30,000 better.
Can you repeat that for me?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because I didn't know that.
I think it went from about 69, Ringgold in FY19, or FY18 was 69-ish thousand. Their appropriation in the current year was over 90,000, and I think it comes back down to the high 80s in FY22.
Wow.
So
What
the
was
net,
the number in the emergency fund currently?
about $45,000.
So my point to the gentleman and my colleagues is, if you looked at all the red and add them together, and a couple of the red, 3 of the reds are on there because they gave up EMS service.
That's right.
Which means, no question, that budget had to go down.
That's right.
But the total of the red, with just a rough, quick looking at it, was about 60 grand. Well, we got 45 in the emergency fund. So we got more than enough if they have those emergency needs. And if I'm fire and rescue, that's one of the biggest charges we have, is the safety. So, if they came in and said, we got to have this, and the director of emergency service comes in and the fire commission weighs in on it, then I'm not sure I understand what all of this rhetoric is that's out there. But I do give my kudos to the fire commission for a job well done, and at least getting us going in a better direction. And thank you too, Mr. Slim.
Any other comments?
Yes, we're talking about the Fire Commission and what a great setup and good deal we got going there. I want to thank Mr. Slimp and all of his folks that do rescue work. The reason I'm saying that, as a board member, and I'm sure some of you have also, I've gotten, randomly you'll get complaints, say, a rescue squad visited and they got a complaint about a certain member on it. But, and I've gotten a couple calls, and I've contacted Chris in the office, and I just want to say kudos. They do a great job in public relation work, in the way that they deal with the public. Chris and I talked earlier. Some folks out there, you're not going to satisfy, and you're not going to please. I don't care what you give them. But I will say that you guys are professional, and I just want to thank you. I went over to the new center where the old election center was at, and I always slip in here early to see different ones, and I was going to see Chris, and I didn't realize he was back over here, and come up on a young man. I think he's a new hire with you guys, and he saw me coming into the office, and I didn't know him from Adam, and the first thing he said was, "How you doing, sir? Anything I can do to help you? And how are you?" He saw the badge, and he said, "How are you affiliated with the organization?" So I told him who I was, and he gave me his name, and but I just want to lift those guys up and thank them for everything they do. Thank you, Chris. You're a good example, and I appreciate all you guys. Appreciate it.
Well, I just want to personally say I agree with most of the comments that have been going on tonight, especially Mr. Warren's. And one thing I've been on this board for 5 years now. We have focused on increasing the funding for fire rescue over the last 4 years. And I would ask those guys to go back and look at what they were getting 4 years ago as compared to what we're getting now. And being on the Fire and Rescue Commission as well, I want to applaud the ad hoc committee because they came back with this matrix. And for me, it's the best way to be equitable across the whole fire department range and fire and rescue, and make sure that each department is getting the money they need for the calls they're making in the number of calls that they're making as far as their stats on how many they're actually getting out the door on when they get called. So I think Mr. Chuck Angiers was on that ad hoc committee, so I appreciate everything they did for us to get this matrix. That was a lot of work. And I actually voiced a concern about the cuts that were done this year and maybe make it at half of what we were putting out there. And they were pretty adamant that they felt this was the best route to go. And I appreciate that accountability to the taxpayers out there. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done to get us to this point. And I know in the future, we're probably going to try to do more for fire and rescue. I can guarantee that as long as I'm on the board. And I'm sure that's the sentiments of most of the people on this board. So did you have something else, Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir. I was just going to say to Mr. Slimp, I do thank you for the good work that you've done thus far since being in the county. And my other comments, I will deal with you when we're together alone, like we always do. Yes, sir, Mr.
I'm sorry, I was,
Oh, yeah. That's enough. Can I make a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Do you have
I just had one more comment, and I started thinking about the fire tax and versus our annual contributions. And we're providing contributions for operations generally. And then on a seemingly random, but soon not to be random basis, we will be providing capital money for equipment replacement. And equipment replacement that's the big nut they've got to crack. I mean, honestly, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds up to $1 million per piece of equipment. And it's a hard thing to do through just fundraising efforts to make those things happen. And it made me think about how in the future we need to think about our funding of our fire departments. And should maybe operations, and I'm just brainstorming with you, maybe operations should be a fundraising effort. Maybe operations should be stews and bake sales, and just apparatus, bottles, turnout gear, hose is what we take care of, because we don't want them to diminish their fundraising efforts in their communities, and that's what they're worried about with the tax thing. So it's almost like a paradigm shift that needs to occur. And we're sitting here arguing over using Ringgold's loss of $4,000 as an example of discontent with the way the county's funding them. You know, meanwhile, at their last report in 2019, they had $478,000 of cash in the bank. And here we are splitting hairs over $4,000. And what we should be talking about is how are we going to buy their next piece of equipment? So I'm just saying that as food for thought, that maybe the tail's wagging the dog on this annual appropriations thing. And long term, we may need to think about structurally, what are we funding and what are they funding? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the appropriations as attached.
I second it.
Okay, motion from Mr. Dudley, second by Mr. Davis. Any further discussion from anyone?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Got it going on today. I do agree with your concept, Mr. Smitherman. I do. Well, can you give me that number again on, you said Ringo 2 years ago, 400 what?
478,000 cash.
I do agree that we have large vehicles, large priced vehicles, and I am for going into the future, looking at other options as far as thinking outside of the box on how we could offset those costs for the county as well as for fire and EMS personnel to help pay for those big ticket winners. Okay, so I agree with that thought on thinking in other areas, and so I agree with that. I agree with that part. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Smitherman.
All right, any other comments? Seeing none, go ahead and cast your vote. Resolution passed 4 of 4. Thank you, Mr. Slint.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, do we have any further matters from committee members? If not, I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.